Now let's move on. Yesterday, we heard from Greg a jazz story about why Louis Armstrong wore the Star of David around his neck for most of his life. Today, we welcome musician, historian, and senior scholar of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, Loren Schoenberg, to share a jazz story about social barriers torn down by Jewish-American clarinet great Benny Goodman.
Hello, my name is Loren Schoenberg. I'm the senior scholar at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. I'm here to talk to you about Benny Goodman and his relationship with Lionel Hampton and Teddy Wilson. I got to know all three of them late in their lives, early in my life. But what I'm going to talk about here is something that happened long before I was born, back in the 1930s. Benny Goodman, of course, had become a national, then international icon known as the King of Swing in the mid-1930s by his excellent and unique interpretation of a music that had existed for at least a decade before he became famous, as pioneered by people like Louis Armstrong and, of course, Fletcher Henderson and many others. Goodman hired Fletcher Henderson to be the main arranger for his band. Actually, he had had Benny Carter there before. And what was different was that Goodman put on his commercial records the fact that his music was being arranged by, sometimes written by, but arranged by great African-American artists such as Fletcher Henderson and Jimmy Mundy and others. This was unknown in the commercial music world. You can look far and wide to see an arranger credit on Ellington Records, where he wrote most of his own music, certainly on Count Basie Records, Jimmy Lunceford Records, and all the other great white bands of the era. It just didn't happen. Well, Goodman did it. But beyond doing that, Goodman added to his band to appear in person two of the greatest African-American musicians of the era, both of whom had really made their reputations early on with work with Louis Armstrong. Lionel Hampton had been the drummer in Armstrong's band, or when Armstrong came out to the West Coast in 1930, he adopted a local band of which Lionel Hampton was the drummer. They made some incredibly innovative and popular and successful records together. Hampton actually started playing the vibraphones, which he had been fooling around with, but he famously did them on Armstrong's 1931 record of Memories of You. And also Teddy Wilson had made his first records with Louis Armstrong in early 1933. In any case, Goodman was on his way up to fame as fame really started to peak in 1937 and 1938. However, on the way up, when there was no foretelling whether he would fail or he would succeed, he decided to not only record with Hampton and Wilson, but sequentially to add them to his band as they appeared in public. Now, you know, there were some humps that had to be got over. Originally, the interracial trio or quartet would appear sometimes on a separate stage or in a separate setting, maybe down on the dance floor or on a second stage from the all-white big band. But nonetheless, if you wanted Benny Goodman's band, you had to accept an interracial band, and this was unheard of at the time. There had been some incidents of interracial people playing together on record dates, occasionally in person, but it was not regular. It was not a regular band. It wasn't advertised as such. Goodman took a lot of hits on the way early on in his big band career for doing this, but nonetheless, he stuck with it. And actually, Lionel Hampton did appear quite frequently with the big band, filling in for Gene Krupa on the drums, and eventually playing drums with the big band on kind of a regular basis later on in his years with the Benny Goodman Band. Teddy Wilson and Lionel Hampton were a study in contrasts. Lionel Hampton extroverted, loved to please the crowd while continuing to play really wonderful, quite complex music. But boy, just looking at him, he was a main draw for the Goodman Band in those years with his verve and enthusiasm. Teddy Wilson was cool as a cucumber, kind of like Benny Carter, who was his mentor before Benny Goodman was. Kind of not a stone face, but didn't show any emotion, just sat there. From looking at him, you really couldn't tell what was coming out of the piano, but he was a brilliant accompanist, offering levels of counterpoint that were both intellectual and greatly musical and swinging and humorous and all those things. So you put them together with Goodman and his kind of deadpan personality, except when he had that clarinet in his mouth, and Gene Krupa, who, like Lionel Hampton, was a showman and who loved to get looked at and do things that attracted the audience. Outside of these significant issues, what really remains is the music. And the music that the Goodman small groups created, it was called chamber jazz, was revolutionary for the time. It was music for listening. Remember, these were dance bands and dance musicians. And up at the top level, the cream of the crop, Ellington, Armstrong, and these musicians and some others, music to listen to and to dance to. But when the Goodman Quartet and Trio played, it was not music for dancing, no matter what the record label said. It was music for listening. And it's unthinkable without Lionel Hampton and Wilson and Goodman's commitment to it. Goodman never wanted to take credit for being a pioneer in that regard. He always said, look, on a piano you need the black keys and you need the white keys, and that's how you make music. And that was his stock answer. But the truth was, it was quite a courageous thing to do and an incredible thing for Hampton and Wilson to go through and deliver like they did.